Hi, this is Tom Broussard. Nice to see everybody. The title for today is Fish Can't See Water and Hospitals Can't See Aphasia. We have been working on this, I'll say this, for many, many years, trying to figure out what the issues are and how we can attack those problems. Because the biggest problem is that so many people not only don't know about aphasia, the people that actually have it aren't necessarily told that they have aphasia until you end up, of course, with a speech language pathology. But that could be months before you actually get to see them. So the problem really has to start at the beginning, at the hospital, because, and this is part of the issue. This is why I wrote this article, that great book called exactly that, Fish That Can't See Water, of course, is the culture that surrounds all of us, that most of us have built ourselves. So, and a lot of it, a huge portion of it is habits that we built that are successful. So it isn't like we're saying all these great things you've done is something that should be changed. We're just saying we need to add some more things that will add to that culture. So they being all the people at the hospitals, begin to see why it's so important that in addition to doing what hospitals do, which is about the physical component of things, because that's what the hospitals do, and they do it very well, these stroke-centered hospitals. But what they don't realize is that when they just do that and send them on our way, as it were, for me and millions of other people, send them on their way, they don't realize that 2/3 of us go home waiting for whatever's going to come next with rehab. And as a result, the same people that were in your care that have aphasia are sent home still not knowing about aphasia. Yes, they've been assessed as aphasia, but no discussion whatsoever at the hospital, nothing in their website, no material to the patients or their family while at the hospital or even at discharge, because there are some hospitals that do provide discharge material, but they're typically talking about stroke and preventing another stroke. So still the 30 to 40% of those same people that also have aphasia, that's the communication deficits, there won't be any discussion of that. And they will stay at home for a long, long time until they begin to understand what that is. And of course, in most cases, we couldn't do it ourselves. It's up to our family to help us with that. And that too is very difficult because there's a lot of things you can get online and find out here and there what this might mean. But even in my case, when I was told I had expressive aphasia, I said, what is this expressive? Does that mean I can say things or I can't say things? Again, this is us on the inside, really not understanding this at all. And in my case, it took a month before I got to see an SLP, but I have seen and read and talked with other people that took 6 months or longer. And in fact, a friend of mine who actually went to go see a therapist, a speech therapist, and started doing work, and this is years later, and finally ordered her reports from her original hospital. It does say aphasia, and she said to the therapist, how come? Why didn't I know? And she said, well, I just assumed that the hospitals told you. Well, no, that is not the case. So that is what we are working on. And when it comes to hospitals who are really so good at what they do, what we need to do is add to what they're already doing on the physical component of that. It's doing some amount of education for the staff, the doctors, the nurses, more about aphasia. More, and often more from people who actually have aphasia, because the SLPs, the speech language pathology, will talk very, very well about how the brain works and how their process works to help our language get better. But there's a lot more that comes from the people with aphasia who, after getting, pick a number, 20, 30, 40, 50 hours of therapy, then it's over. And then it's on your own. And it's going to take thousands of hours of therapy, of your own therapy, to get better. So people with stroke and aphasia at Aphasia Nation can go to hospitals and help them better understand why it's so important to have this information from the very beginning. Because if you don't start it at the beginning and you get sent home, there's nobody else that's going to help you. Yes, there are plenty of chance opportunities to meet other people, to find your way into local stroke groups. But even that, before getting started, it's going to still take months. And in my case, it was 4 more months, even after seeing an SLP, before I got to see another person that had stroke and aphasia, another human that actually had it. So other than seeing that, I really had no idea what this really means when you have aphasia, lost your language, can't express, can't hear, have hearing issues that had nothing to do with my hearing itself. So again, this is all how this happens. And it really is a family affair, because at the beginning, the family can hear what it is or not hearing what I'm trying to say. And they have no idea either. And it's quite different when it comes to being able to speak one particular way, able to write, as I did. Writing, I did lots and lots of writing. I didn't realize, and my family, well, I never showed it to them actually, because I just, whatever, I didn't want them to be bothered. If they had read it, they would say, oh, here's Tom writing words that make sense, but the words themselves in sentences didn't. So there's an awful lot of information for the family as well. And certainly repetition and starting early is what happens with speech therapy. And that's what the therapist would tell you. And since that doesn't happen until you actually show up at a rehab facility, then that means all that time in between, in that gap, will people who don't understand about repetition and who certainly don't know this whole issue of starting early and often in terms of the language activities that are needed. And it's certainly to the hospitals, it isn't like we're trying to teach the hospital staff and doctors and nurses exactly everything there is about aphasia, but just a little bit. Giving the repetition component is to talk to us every day and say, hi, Tom, how are you doing? How's your speaking, reading, writing, whatever it might be, saving the evidence, writing it down as best you can, even recording yourself with your phone. But every day, then at least I go home with some materials, beginning to see that this is what this thing aphasia is. Because when I was at the hospital, having been told I had aphasia, but still unable to understand what was said, I went home not even knowing, other than figuring out that there must be something wrong with my brain. But other than that, I had no other idea. And when it comes to the wider public, you've seen it in the news recently, which is always very helpful. And here's a couple of good examples. Is Gabbard Gifford had a gunshot, clearly, 11, 12 years ago, clearly has aphasia, but that is one way that you can actually come upon aphasia. Bruce Willis, a lot of talk in the press about aphasia. Clearly, he probably has a primary progressive aphasia, which is a neurodegenerative disease. It's not the same kind as aphasia like me, expressive aphasia, receptive aphasia, global aphasia, and PPA, primary progressive aphasia. There's one group, there's another. The PPA is completely different. That's a disease. This is an acquired brain injury. And then you have John Fetterman, again, not even talking about aphasia in the press. All of us with expressive aphasia, and he's doing very, very well, but still no concrete understanding by the public and the press and the hospital system to really understand why it's so important to know about aphasia, because it's all about plasticity. It's all about how the brain works and rewires the brain. It should be something we all should learn about, even when we are young, even like photosynthesis, when we were in 5th grade, to begin to understand even a little bit about how the brain works when it comes to plasticity, which is not unlike photosynthesis, where it converts light into green leaves. Plasticity converts thought, might as well be sunlight, and cognitive activities into new brain matter. The remaining cells after a stroke are still healthy. And as a result, they have this capacity to grow new, what we call dendrites and synapses, but metaphorically, they're branches and leaves. They grow more and contribute to what we call the learning field. And that's how I went from unable to being able. And I just happen to have the evidence of all of that. And again, if we were told that at the beginning, even if we couldn't understand it, just do these activities, record these activities, so that at a certain point, you will actually get to see yourself how you have improved when it comes to reading, writing, speaking, as well as awareness, which has its own skill and its own deficits. So you can be actually getting better, which I was in my diary. I still wasn't aware that I was getting better until awareness took over. And finally, I could see for the first time the difference between what was bad and what is now good. So even awareness has its own issue. So even the press needs an awful lot of work to do about aphasia. And educating the wider public for sure going forward. So that what we were asking the hospitals to do is add information about aphasia in their website. It's really a tragedy that you can go to stroke-centered hospitals that do a lot of work with stroke, but aphasia doesn't even show up in that website. So you really have no idea. You really do have no idea. And that's a travesty. So has to be information on the website. There has to be materials presented to the patient and their family while still at the hospital. As I mentioned, if you're discharged home and you stay at home for months, that is not good. It has to be done at the beginning. You can provide all kinds of information. The best thing you can do is provide this, as I have done and have given hundreds of copies of these to hundreds of hospitals around the country. But once they use them, they're over. And again, nobody gets this kind of information, which everybody needs. You can't just get a couple of pieces of paper from one organization or another and think that you know something about aphasia. This book puts everything you need there together so you can get to see it in images and then get to see more information as you are more able to understand, as well as your family. So provide that kind of information at the hospital, or at the very least at discharge, so that you go home at least having a decent idea of what is going to happen going forward. Because if none of this ever gets done, the first time the wider public, the press, the politicians, and other people with stroke won't know that they have this thing called aphasia until it happens to you when you get to the ER. So this is what we're doing at Aphasia Nation. We are working hard to build this team of stroke coordinators, people with aphasia, of course, and the SLPs, who also, meaning the SLPs, don't know a lot about the other side of the building when it comes to the stroke coordinators, nor do they do much with the speech therapist as well. So we're really trying to make teams of this at every hospital so that finally management at the hospitals will finally see that their own hospital does not provide information about aphasia. So that is what we're working on. This article will go out to as many hospitals as we can get a hold of, as well as people with aphasia who are going to walk in and say, I'm a person with stroke and aphasia. I would like to talk with you more about why this is so important for the aphasia world going forward. Thank you very much. Fish can't see water. Hospitals cannot see aphasia. And this is what we are working on. Thank you very much. Have a great holiday, and I will see you next year. Take care of yourselves. See you later. Bye-bye.